right, it's just about 10:30. Thanks everybody for being here. We're going to get started. This is Scripting Opportunities, the beginning track scripting session. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. We do have water service in the back if you get thirsty. The restrooms are out the door and across the hall. If your children become unruly, please take them out. If you drink too much water, the restrooms are out the door and across the hall. And please take a moment and silence your phones because you're not going to want to miss what I'm showing you today. This is Scripting Opportunities. The train is leaving the station, so if you're not in the right session, this is your moment. Let me just take a quick survey here. Who here is an in-house developer? Who here works for the people that use your software? There we go. All right. Do we have any consultants in the room? Okay, cool. I can speak freely. Excellent. Okay. Any certified developers in the room? Beginner track session? All right, cool. Any future certified developers in the room? That's the right spirit. There we go. That's way to go, guys. All right. So a little bit about me. My name is Paul Mitchell, though the shampoo is not named after me. Potbelly Sandwich Works is named after me. I'm a husband and father of 6. I've been married to my wife for 23 years. I'm a Cold War veteran. In the Air Force, I was a cryptologic linguist. I listened to the Soviet Air Force in West Berlin. I was a political candidate in Illinois in 2010. I have a BA in economics with a minor in history from the University of Texas at Arlington, right down the road from here. I am a knight of the Society for Creative Anachronism. That means I put on fairly realistic armor and hit people with sticks. I get into medieval sword fighting. Is there any other SCA members in the room? One. All right, cool. 20 years experience with the FileMaker platform. I started in 1998 with FileMaker tech support when it was outsourced to a company in Carrollton, Texas, not very far from here. From there I went on to being an in-house developer like many of you. I've worked for 3 FileMaker Platinum partners, presently a senior developer at Harmonic Software Production Studios. I'll tell you, that's a sweet place to be. And I am FileMaker 17 certified. So, getting into it, and let me just say before I jump into it too much, beginning scripting is an interesting topic because I know I can start with scripts menu, script workspace, but where do you stop? I mean, so what I've tried, there's a balance to be struck there, and I hope I've struck it well, but I've got a lot of material I'm going to cover, so I'm going to be going kind of fast. Don't get bothered by that. Don't be put off by that. If you lose your place, just try to pick up where you can, and be sure to download the files after the session because I think you're going to find it all very, very accessible and very user-friendly when you dig into that file. So, our story so far. Our hero, that's you, in an ordinary day at the office. You have a coworker in distress, but you have a secret superpower, FileMaker scripting. This is a true story. I was walking through the accounting department in a place where I was an in-house developer. And I walked past one of my coworkers, and she is copying data from FileMaker into Excel, one cell at a time, highlighting the data in a FileMaker field and pasting into a cell in Excel, one at a time. And I watched her for a moment, and I said, "What are you doing?" She says, "I'm building a report." I said, "By copying data one cell at a time into Excel?" She says, "Yes." I said, "How often do you do this?" She says, "Every month." I said, "How long does it take you?" She said, 3 days. I'm like, we can make this better. I set her up in a FileMaker script. With one click of a button, she was able to do in 15 seconds what had previously been taking her 3 days every month. And do that math, that's more than a month out of the year on just copying data one cell at a time. I felt like a hero, and she saw me as one. This is the kind of thing that you can do with FileMaker scripting, and thus the name of our session, Scripting Opportunities. You always want to be on the lookout for this kind of opportunity to transform somebody's repetitive drudge work into something that flows smoothly, to free them up to do the things that only people can do. So, as I'm sure you already know, but I just got to start at the basics, you can launch a script from the scripts menu, from a button on a layout, from a keyboard shortcut. You can launch a script from a script trigger, like on first window open, or on last window close, or on record load, and so forth. You can call a script from another script, and you can schedule scripts in FileMaker server to run on schedule. Of course, scripts are edited in the script workspace. You can put multiple scripts in a single window, each on their own tab, or you can break them out into multiple windows. You can select commands from the menu, or just type right into the space. It's amazingly user-friendly to work with scripting in FileMaker. I'm going to show you one way to approach writing a script, and it simply involves writing the comments first and then filling in your action commands. It's like a novelist outlining his story before he writes it. So let me show you a little example here. Let me go over to my demo file here. And this is an example of a on first window open script. So if we open up the script workspace and look at our first script writing example, zoom in on that a little bit, all this is comments. So we need an audit script that's going to run, just for example, we need an audit script that will run when called either from another script or from a script trigger. Capturing the username and the account name, tag the logon, go to the correct layout, and set the action being audited. So first we'll set global variables, next we'll log on to the log table, then create a new record, then populate it, and finally we'll return to the layout we started from. That's just the process we want to go through. And when you think through this process, you've then done half the hard work of scripting, is knowing what you actually want the script to achieve and knowing what steps you have to go through to do that. Then, here's another example, then you simply add in those script steps. And so then you see I've added set error capture on. I like to set error capture on because if an error occurs during my script, I want to handle that within the context of the script. I don't want my user to be exposed to the default application error messages. I usually set user abort to off because like a roller coaster designer, I only want my users to get off where I want them to get off. I don't want them picking their own places to get out of the script. And then I just collect the information I need, go to the places I need to do, and we'll talk in more detail about how some of this is done. But every script I'm going to run calls this little script, and what it does is it records which script I ran and timestamps it and who ran it, and so then I've got a little table somewhere that records when all these things were done. And you'll see that as we go through. So I'm going to go down a list of very basic script commands. This is a big long list window, and I could spend the next hour and a half going into detail about all of these steps, but the fact is they're really all very self-explanatory. And so I'm really not even going to read you the list. These are all things that do exactly what they say. They're all things that are very simple to learn to use, and you're going to see most of them in examples as I go forward, but I really don't want to, I want to get into a little bit more depth on how to write scripts and techniques to use rather than going step by step. You don't need me to read you the help menu. So definitely you'll want to know all these steps. You're going to use them all the time. Most of you probably know them already. I do want to call out two of them though. In the right column at the top, replace field contents is a dangerous one. There's no undo for it, and it edits a field throughout your entire found set of records. So you certainly want to make sure that your found set is right, that your context is right. When you're using this in a script, you need to make sure you're error trapping in advance of employing this step. So for instance, if you're doing a find for a found set of records and then editing them all, you want to make sure you got your found set right before you edit them all in a script. Another one is a new one. It only came in FileMaker 16, Truncate Table. A lot of us are still getting to know this one. I've never used it in production, but what it does is it deletes all the records in a table, independent of whatever your found set is. So if you get a found set of 4 and you run Truncate Table, all the records in the entire table, no matter if they're found set or not, are going to be deleted. And if you had cascading deletes set up for related fields, those records won't be deleted. I'm not sure what the use case for this step is yet, frankly, but that's something that I wanted to call out. The Truncate Table is one you want to be sure you know what it is before you use it. So we're going to step up from what's easy and go on to what's possible. We're going to look at a script at the end of this that does the work of a person without human involvement. It's going to free up people to do, as I said before, the things that only people can do. But first we're going to take examples of some of the most common database functions. We're going to streamline them and automate them. Before I get into that though, I do have to take a moment and talk about script variables. Now we've got a session specifically about script variables in this room at the 1 o'clock hour with Mike Duncan, Variables 101. I have no doubt that's going to be a great session, and certainly there's material to cover an hour and more on variables, so I'm sure it's going to be awesome. But just to touch base, because I do have to use these in a lot of my examples, variables are very simple, they're very powerful. They come in 2 flavors, local with a single $ sign at the beginning of their name, and those are effective only in the current script. or global, that has $2 in front of its name, and it's going to be to the current session and the current file. So that's going to persist as long as your current session stays open and your current file stays open. Let's take a quick look at script variables. So here's an example of a script where I'm using variables. I've simply set a variable called $date to the current date. And then I've displayed it in a custom dialog. Now, here I've got an entry field in the dialog that shows the variable value also. New in FileMaker 17, we can edit variables in the custom dialog. Where have you been all my life? Hashtag YBAML. So we can edit this variable, and for instance, my birthday was just last week. And there it is. It's now showing me an edited variable that I was able to edit on the fly. Since this is a single $ variable, it's only going to be visible while the script is running. But we can also, no, we can't do that while that's open. I'll come back to that. That's one look at a variable. Let's take a quick look at how we did that. So here in my variable script, I've got a lot of comments on a lot of these, so that when you go back to read it, you can see what I'm doing here. It's a simple set variable command. I've named the variable, and I've used a function to identify what the date is. Just that simple. And then my custom dialog displays the variable right here, and among some other text. But more fun, when I get to the input field, this is the new part down here, where I can choose the option of making my input field a variable. Give it up for FileMaker, isn't that awesome? Everybody say wow. Wow, very good, yeah, all right. Hashtag YBAML, all right. That's up on our marquee in our booth. If you were wondering, watch by, what's that hashtag mean? That's it. So, let me show you one other thing I played around with. I can't spend too much time on this. But another way to edit variables, you can edit variables using the set variable command. You can also use a let function to edit variables. You can also edit them right there in the script viewer, and I'll show you that in just a second too. So this set variable function uses a let function, and it sets 6 variables, or actually one variable with 6 repetitions. The first one is set, and I've used a little bit of math to get the date of the first day of the week. And then all the rest of the repetitions are the dates of the subsequent 6 days. So I've got the dates, I'll be setting the dates of all the days of this week, just that simple. But there are a variety of things you can do. But just with this one function, I'll be setting 7 variables. And let's take a look at what that looks like. You got to save your scripts in FileMaker. If it thinks you've edited them, it's going to ask you, hey, do you want to save these? Do you want to revert them? What's the deal? So the second variable just sets all those, and this time it's displaying them in what's called a virtual list. And you probably heard that term. You may not have had it explained to you yet, but simply put, these are all calculation fields. They're unstored, and they're using variables to display data for you. And so there's no data behind this table. There's just variables. If we look up in the data viewer, which we'll come back to, where'd my data viewer go? There it is. You can see all my 7 variables, each in their own repetitions. Like repeating fields, variables can have repetitions. And that's convenient because it numbers them for you. Everybody say wow. Now say it backwards. Very good, all right. Appreciate you cooperating with me. It helps a speaker to be able to know that they're connected. This is not television, I can see you. All right, so. This is my first time speaking at DevCon, so it's good to have you all here. I was wondering how many people I would have. It looks like about 100, maybe 75 or so. Excellent. So let's go back to that. So that's variables. We're going to be touching on variables a whole lot through these next examples. Now, one of the most common things anybody ever does with a set of data is do a find for a specific found set, and then sort that in the order they need to look at it. So we're going to look at restoring a manual find or sort, editing the perform find script step, and also trapping for errors. So The simplest way to create a find function in a script is simply to do it manually. If you've got a complex find and you know how to do it, just set it up. Put all your find requests there, omit what you need to omit, and run the find. And then when you go to your script, you activate that perform find script step. It's going to remember what you've got and will offer to restore it for you. So let's take a look at what that looks like. This is a stored find. Now I have a database here of 50,000 sample records. They're just names and addresses all across America. And this script, all it does is find all the ones in Texas and then sorts them by city and then by last name and then by first name. And so all I did to create this script was simply do a find for TX in the state field and then create the script. Let's take a look at that script. So it opens a new window, sets it to a particular location, sets it to a particular layout. Since FileMaker 16, we could, in the new window step, we could specify the layout. If you're working with older versions of FileMaker, when you use a new window, you want to use a go to layout step. So then I adjust the window to fit its size, and then I do the perform find. And here's where I want to say magic, but it's just a little bit of technology. It's just doing this example, state equals Texas. And all I did was do the find first, and then I added the perform find to it. And what that looks like, if I scroll down over here, I can simply double click on perform find. There's a new one. If I choose specify find request, there's that last find that happened. So FileMaker already remembers what that was. But I'm not going to keep that. Although if I want to, I don't have to scroll down on the right. I can simply start typing in the window, and it'll pop up some suggestions of what I might be trying to get to. And there it is. If I want to do something else, for instance, go to related record, I can actually put an abbreviation like GTRR, and it will pop that right up. At go to related record. So it actually recognizes those things when you start typing things into the script workspace. So that's pretty nice. So if you don't want to save what you've done, you can just go up here to the scripts menu, throw out revert script. It throws out all the changes you've made. If you want to save your current script or all the scripts you've edited, those are all right here as well. Let me just quickly touch base on some of these things. You can exclude things from the scripts menu so people don't see it when they click on the drop down. And you can also run scripts with full access privileges, so that if you have a user who isn't usually, for example, able to delete a record, and you want them to be able to in a specific case in a script, you can enable them to do that with this command that grant full access privileges. We're going to revert this script because I was really happy with how it was before. And we'll close my found window. Oh, and the sort is very much the same thing. So if you look at the sort dialog, you see it sorted by city and last name and first name, and restoring the sort works exactly the same way. Now you can edit the perform find in Script Maker. So for example, here I've commented out or disabled this script step. You do that by hitting Command / or there's a choice right up here. In the edit menu, you can enable or disable script steps. So this was a more complicated find. This had 3 criteria. I'm looking for anybody in Texas or anybody in California or anybody in Albany, New York. That's scripting 3 find requests all at once. Anybody here from Texas? Anybody from Kerrville, Texas? Okay, good, I can speak freely. All right, you're from Kerrville, really? All right, my timekeeper is from Kerrville. All right, cool. So since he's not a FileMaker guy, we're not going to include him. I don't know, maybe you are a FileMaker guy. We can add another find request just by hitting the new. And for instance, let's throw down the city. Select that. Type in Kerrville. I can choose omit. And now when I find for Texas, I won't be getting anybody in Kerrville. And if you've ever been to Kerrville, you know why you'd want to do that. I'm sorry, I'm kidding. But he knows he's been to Kerrville. All right. So if I run this script, I can run it right here. Let's minimize that again. And go over to my layout that has all that. You see I've got 13,942 records of all of Texans but Kerrville, plus Californians and people from Albany, New York. Everybody say wow. Now say it backwards. Now say it upside down. Mom, very good. All right, you're paying attention. I'm glad I've got your attention still. Excellent. All right. Okay, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit there. Another thing we want to make sure we do is trap for errors. Sometimes people will look for something that's not in the database. Well, that's the most normal thing in the world. Hey, have you got any of X? No, don't have any X's. I only have Y's today. I've got an example here where we're searching for somebody in Ontario. Sorry, it's only a US database. It's hard-coded, but you get the idea. So when you don't trap for errors, this is what your user will see. This script goes to the other layout, just like the other one did, and then it performs a find, and it's finding for records in Ontario. There are no records in Ontario. And now your user sees this lovely generic error messages, no records match this find criteria. What do you want to do? The script is still running. Hasn't canceled the script, but now it wants to know, should we modify the find to look for something else? Just continue the script and go on with whatever was going to happen next? Or do we cancel the script? Well, I don't know. If you had a truncate table or something after that, probably don't want to continue the script. You'd have to train your users pretty well to have them understand what to do with an error message like this. Rather than show them that, let's instead cancel that script. Close this window. Now I'm going to run the same script again. I'm going to hold down the Shift key while I do it. And now I get a message that says, a custom message. It says, error, no records were found for state equals Ontario. This window will be closed. Now the only thing they can do from here is just hit OK. They cannot continue the script. They cannot change what you're searching for. All they can do is hit OK, and now it puts them back where they started. That puts you in control of your user's experience. So you always want to be careful to be trapping for errors when you're doing things like finds, imports, exports, anything that something could get in the way of. Let's look at how we did this. So again, I created the new window, adjusted it to fit, and then if I'm holding down the active modifier key equals 1, if I'm holding that down, that means I'm holding down the Shift key when it gets to that step. Then it's going to do all this stuff to capture the error and show the stuff. Otherwise, I just did perform find, and what happened after that was just default FileMaker behavior. So let's look at what happens when I capture the error. First, I set error capture on. That suppresses the default application error message. Then I perform my find. And so then when it throws an error, I can capture that value myself using a getLastError function. Now here I'm just testing to see if it exists at all, if there's any error at all that happened, but there are different errors that it might throw. Maybe it was an invalid search criteria. Maybe it was no records were found. There's a lot of choices there. I just want to see if there's any error at all. If I put 404, which is no errors found, and it returns a 401, which is invalid search criteria, I want to make sure that I'm capturing for all the possible errors that might come. You can set it up to calculate what are all the possible error messages and capture each one of those individual codes and return a different response for each code if that's the user experience you need to create. It's that powerful, but just for this example, I just made it the simplest one. And then I said, okay, well, in that case, if there's nothing found, let's just throw all the records there and go back to where we started. Close this window and tell the customer what we did. So imports and exports, it's very frequent. The boss is going to say, I need an export of that stuff in Excel so that I can play with the data. Now you may tell the boss, well, what is it you want to do? Let me set that up for you in FileMaker. And he may say yes, or he may say no, but probably he wants the data right now, so you have to do the export. So we're going to show you the path variable. We're going to look at restoring imports and exports, and we're going to look at the perform a script we're going to talk a little bit about considerations when you want to perform a script like this on server for both exports and imports. So first we're going to do an export. And you can see it's thrown me in a new window, done enough, and what it's done is it ran that same stored find and sort again, and then exported the results of that. And you can see on my desktop here, it's created a new folder, #YBAML, because that's another new feature in FileMaker 17. You can actually specify a folder tree to export to, and if it doesn't exist, FileMaker will create it for you. That's new in 17. Where have you been all my life? And here I've opened the data in numbers, so the boss can see. We can take a look at what we're sending over to the boss before we send it over to him. Because I never like to create an email or send data that I haven't looked at. But here it is. Here's my folder, and then here's my file. This wasn't there before. FileMaker created that with the export script step. Again, let's take a quick look at what we did with our export step. And it's very simple. First, we just use perform script to call that other script. And now I set a variable that I call $path. And I find myself using this in almost every app I build. $path. If I have to export something or import something, this is what I want to do. And what this does is it simply grabs the file path that I want to put the file at. And in this case, I specified, here's my folder / and the export file name. Now, if you're on Windows, you might need a prefix ahead of that. I find that just the file : prefix, and I use this function, use get system platform, and then I take the absolute value of it. If it's 2, it's Windows. Otherwise, it's 1, it's Mac, and it doesn't need anything. I'm told with some export file formats, it does want something else in front of that, but I haven't personally experienced that. So, then I ran the export step. I did it with dialog off, so all it did was just find the data and throw it on out there on the desktop. But create directories on, that's new. You can turn that on or off. If you're creating directories, you want to be sure this says on. And then I just use then it just calls the path variable to know where to put it. Oh, that's not what I wanted. So specify output, let's cancel that. And let me revert that script because I just made a mistake. This is what to do when you make a mistake. There we are. I didn't mean to change this script. Let's go take a look at that. There, so you see my path variable is here. I selected comma-separated values. This is just like doing a manual export at this point. And I chose automatically open file. For my own taste, I never choose create email with file as attachment because, as I said, I don't like to email an exported file that I haven't looked at. So that's exporting. Importing works much the same way. I use the same variable to find the file I'm importing. And again, if you do this manually, like with the find, when you create the script step, FileMaker will remember what you did. And that is, in fact, is exactly how I created this step. So here you see I'm using the path variable again and specifying a CSV file. And then you select the import order. Of course, when you're selecting a CSV file, it doesn't read field names. And so until you're doing that manually, it won't show you any of the data. But that's why, particularly with an import, it's convenient to do it manually first and then restore what you did manually. And let's take a look at what that looks like. Let's say, for example, that I, for some reason, deleted all this data that I just exported. This is what, 5,600 records. Say I deleted them all. Oh no, I need them back. Okay, there's no undo for a group deletion like that, but what there is an import if you've got the data somewhere else. So we'll click that button. Here I've got my fields all lined up properly. I can scroll through them just as with a manual import. Hit OK on that. And maybe with something in production, I wouldn't even want to show that to my users. But now all my data's back. Right here. Anybody want to read all those 56,000 records? No? Okay, all right. 5,600 records? All right. We'll just go back to the button layout then. So that's importing and exporting. It's a lot faster to do this on the server, but it can be tricky with some of the file paths are different. You'll definitely want to do a little research into that. Also on server, FileMaker does not import or export to or from FileMaker profiles. So if you've got a solution that's designed to do that, you want to run a script on a server, You can't put it to out to FileMaker. You can't import in from FileMaker. I had one solution where the developer in a number of places had simply imported data from one table in the file to another table in the file. And when I tried to run those scripts on server, I wasn't able to make that happen. We had to do some workarounds for that. So that's a consideration when you're moving a script up to the server. That's something that simply can't do. We'll talk a little bit more about things that you can and can't do on server and in other environments in just a few minutes. So that was importing and exporting. I'm going to touch a little bit on custom dialogues, but just a little bit. I've already touched most of it, and but I think seem to be doing all right for time. Let's talk about custom dialogues for a second. Here's a custom dialogue, and they're a wonderful way for your users to be able to interact with your scripting. They can collect information, they can share information. You can, for instance, they can ask questions and you can put in a selection. Here, I click the blue button, it tells me I chose blue. And I can set variables to it. For instance, I can put in some names here, just like this. And now up here in the data viewer, you can see, since those were global variables, my first, second, and third variables have the names that I typed in. Now I can also edit these variables here in the data viewer. I digress a moment, but just by double clicking on one of them, I can put in another name. You can edit a global variable there in the data viewer. So let's look and see how I did that with the script, that custom dialog. I showed several custom dialogs. You can simply show a message. You can show buttons, up to 3 of them. If you have data to input, you have to choose the box that says commit data. It used to be that only the first button would commit data. Now you can choose for any of the buttons to commit the data in the fields. And you can choose any field you want to have in your database, including related fields, to be displayed in these windows for people to be able to edit. Most often we use global fields in this situation until now when we can use variables. The advantage of global fields was they were specific to the user's session. But now since we can use variables, and if you're working in 17, I strongly encourage you to use that feature. And the way you select a variable is you just click this little radio button right here and then just name the variable. And FileMaker will even add a $sign to it. That's a quick look at custom dialogues. That is one you're going to use a lot, I guarantee it. I'm going to talk a little bit about script parameters for a moment. That's a great way to pass information to and from a script, from a button, from other scripts that call them. There's a whole lot to be said about them, and Maka and Karnakau is going to be saying it at 4 o'clock, again right here in this room. He's going to spend a whole hour with passing parameters, a complete summary from simple to complex. I'm certain it's going to be an awesome session. It's certainly something that deserves its own session, but I do need to touch on it in the basic class. We're also going to talk a little bit about subscripts and consolidated scripts. These are some examples where we'll use script parameters. I'm going to show you one of my favorite print report examples, and we're also going to see an example of a module control script. So here's an example of using script parameters. Here's a picture of me doing my sword fighting thing. Click a different button, and there's my kids. Hey, you kids, stop running around the room like that. All right, thank you. All right. Both of those buttons run the same script. It's the exact same script, but they did different things. They showed different layouts, different pictures. They did different actions. Well, that's because I had different script parameters on them. Yep, not what I meant to do. There we go. So, that's custom dialogues. All right, here's my script parameter script. It's the same script, but each button had a different parameter on it. So the first one had a script parameter simply of 1, and so I've used an if function to test for that. Get script parameter equals 1, that's my first choice. Oh, in that case, we use the one that had the sword fighters, and we just expand it from the middle. That's what this loop function does. I'm not going to get into that in detail, but it's a fun one. You can pull out the sample file and see how I did it. Otherwise, else if the script parameter is 2, then show the other window and do something different with it. This is immensely powerful. This is a very simple example of something that you can use in a large number of different ways. One point about this is that if you were to click on the scripts menu and run this script, that would not pass a script parameter at all. And the way I've built this with an if and an else if you run it without a script parameter, it won't do anything because neither of those tests will prove true. That it can be a great way to help lock down some of your functionality. If you only want a script to run from a particular place, you can exclude it from the scripts menu, but you can also set it up to where it has to get a parameter to be able to do the right thing. So that's a quick look at script parameters. I've got another example here. This script that I'm going to run first calls that same perform find and sort script again, and then it throws it into a different layout, a report layout, and then it calls another script, a third script, that will display that report in the way that I want my user to see it. This is what that looks like. And so now we're seeing our customer list at Harmonic. And wouldn't it be nice if this were my customer list at Harmonic? And yes, all the data is duplicated because I made a mistake with my test data last night. And here's my report. It's 239 pages long and it looks gorgeous. And my script is paused. Look here, I've got a little continue button right here in the upper right. My script is paused. If I close this window, that pause condition will be inherited by the window behind it, which is really not something I want, because one of the next steps is it closes this window. And if I close this window manually and then continue the script, my main window would be closed. So you want to be careful how you manage things like that. But if I hit continue, then it's going to give me the opportunity to say, all right, hey, do you like this report we put out for you? Do you want to, does it say the things you need? Do you want to cancel this and go back and change it or fix it? Do you want to print it out to paper, or do you want to email it to somebody? Well, in this case, we're going to email it to somebody. Should we save the attachment to the desktop or just put it in the temporary folder where you'll never see it? Well, if we put it in the temporary folder, they'll never see it. If we put it on the desktop, they can work with it. So let's save it to the desktop. We should all go out for lunch after this, right? Okay. So here's my email. I use the set email script, and I use the local email client to put out that file. But here it is with my attachment right attached. And we'll go take a look at how I did this. You'll notice my email address is broken, because I don't want you all to send me this email over and over again when you download this file. So I will not save that. And there you can see my email script example report right there on the desktop where it was created. So again, let's go in and open my script workspace and take a look at how I did that. So the interesting part of that was this, where I've gone through and set my variables. There we go. And I put it in preview mode. What this does is it takes a series of script parameters that are passed as an array, just using parameter and then added a paragraph symbol and then another one. And then I've used a let function to set all those parameters to their own different variables. Thus parameters become variables, and thus I can start choosing what to do based on what those variables say. And by the end of it, I come down here and I use this send mail script step, which I do need to show you here because it's so very cool. I can send directly from the SMTP server or use the local user's email client. I can send to just one email using the data from the current record. I can send to all the current records that have email fields. Another cool thing, another new feature, hashtag YBAML in FileMaker 17, is I can attach multiple attachments to an email. Where have you been all my life? New feature. So that just simply sends an email, and I can choose it to run with or without dialog. I chose with dialog. If you choose it to run without dialog, instead of bringing it up in your drafts folder, it will put it into your outbox, and then the email client will, in due course, send it out without anybody touching it, which may or may not be a good thing depending on your particular needs. But again, it's something you want to be aware of. And then the last thing it does is it closes that window just to keep things clean and bring people back to where they started from. When I first started in FileMaker 20 years ago and I started learning this, one of the things they told us was use subscripts as much as possible. That's a subscript is simply a script that's called by another script. And they said, parse things out as much as you can. If you've got a function that's done over and over again and it might be called by many different scripts, rather than have the same set of steps in many scripts, you'd put those steps into a subscript and then you'd call it from many places. That's certainly one approach, and it's certainly a valid one. Another approach, another very valid approach, is what we call a control script. And in a harmonic, we use this when we've got a large complex solution that we've built for someone, and it has multiple modules, like a billing module and a payable module and an employee module or something like that. And each of these has multiple scripts associated with the module. That can be challenging to find all those in the scripts menu. And so one of the things that we do is we'll put those together in what we call a control script. And so it might be a payable control script or a billable control script. And so what I've done here is all these buttons do the same things as the buttons on the other tab, but they all run the same script. So if I hit the variables button, it does the same things you've seen before. And if I hit the perform the stored find, it would do the same thing you saw before. But instead of doing it in different scripts, it does it all in one script. And here's that one script. It uses script variables passed by the buttons to decide which set of steps is it going to go through. And this can be a way of organizing your scripting. Yep. I went to another extreme because we have another new function in FileMaker 17 in which you can specify by calculation the name of the script you're calling in the perform script command. That's perform script. Instead of choosing it from a list and hard coding it, you can pass it as a calculation to vary which script you're calling. And so I've done the same thing again, only this time I'm going back out to those same scripts. All the buttons are calling the same script, but they're using the script parameter to decide which script to use. Let me see if I can do this. Oh, I'm on the wrong step. That's my problem. So I'm calling it by name, and the name is get script parameter here. So whatever script parameter I pass, that's the script it's going to run. And that is simply over on this tab. Again, all these same buttons run the same script, but this script only has one action step. And it simply sorts which other subscripts is it going to call. These are alternative ways to write your script. I don't really have to have an opinion on which is the best. You pick the one that works best for you. For the circumstances you're working in. But these are different techniques, and I think you probably want to have them all in your toolbox. So I want to walk you through the script debugger. It's a wonderful tool. It was brought in several versions back. When we got it, it was the greatest thing in the world. Before that, we always had to just insert pauses in our scripts and to see, okay, has it gotten to where I need it to be? Is it paused now? Okay, what's happened since then? And so we just insert pauses while we were troubleshooting a script. But when we got a script debugger, it was wonderfully powerful, and they just keep making it better. We're also going to take a quick look at the data viewer, and I already talked about disabling script steps. Pausing we still do when we're testing things that are running on server, because you can't run script debugger when you're running a script on the server. So it's nice to throw in a pause every once in a while when you're doing that. But let me take you on a quick tour of the script debugger and the data viewer. Here in a FileMaker Pro Advanced tools, we have the script debugger. And if I go to run a script, like, I guess this one, then I can start walking through it. And it shows me all the steps. I see all my comments, and then I can see what all these script steps are. One thing I can do is I can set a stop point, and I can press the run pause button to run at full speed to that stop point. If you're working with a script that has 800 lines, and you want to do some testing and some editing around line 650, this is a very nice way to get to 650 without having to step one at a time through all those steps. This button here with a pen actually opens up the script in another window where you can edit it Very convenient to jump to that. This block button, the stop button, as you think of it on a recorder, will halt the script. It will stop all script activity that's going on at the time. The step over button will execute a step unless it's a perform script step. When it does that, it will run that subscript at full speed until it reaches the stop point or until it gets back to where you launched it from. The step into button actually just simply executes the step. If it's a perform script, if it calls a subscript, it will also walk you one at a time through that subscript. The step out will step you out of the subscript. It will run the subscript to a stop point or till it gets to the end of that subscript and bring you back to the main script. If you're in the main script, it will run you to the end of that main script or to a stop point if you put one there. And very, very useful is the set next step button, which allows you to specify a step and say, never mind what's next, we're going to here. So if I click that step, I can then make it the actual next step we're going to do. So that I can jump over a big chunk of a script if I need to and just look at the parts that I'm testing right now. It's a wonderful tool, Script Debugger. There's so much you can do with it. That's a quick look at it. And I opened an extra window while I was doing that. All right. We'll take a quick look at the data viewer. When you're running a script, this is going to, especially when you're walking through it with Script Debugger, this is going to show you all the fields that you're editing in that script. It's going to show you all the variables you've created in that script and what are the values in those. And as those things get edited and changed, you'll be able to see that in the data viewer. Again, it's a wonderful way to know what's going on with your script. You can also, there's a second tab, the Watch tab. You can also create calculations here. So first, it's just a wonderful thing for debugging your calculations, but also you can see what's going on with your solution. For instance, this one, this calculation is set to return the height and width of my current window. So if I resize my current window, those numbers will change. That's a quick look at the data viewer. When you're testing a script, you walk in through it with the Script Debugger, pop open the data viewer, and you'll be able to see much better what's going on with your script. So, frequently you'll find the need to use a loop, and with a loop I always use a trap and a counter. I'm going to show you that, and we're going to talk a little bit about performing scripts on servers. So I've got a big example I'm going to show you. So I've got a big example. Imagine that somebody in your office, like is the administrative assistant to the president of the company, and you've got customers in all 50 states. And you've got directors in all 50 states, and they want to see a report on their current list of customers every Monday morning. And that administrative assistant has to pull out from that, and they don't want to do it themselves. They want somebody to send it to them, because they're the bosses and they haven't learned FileMaker. And so they have somebody send it to them. The administrative assistant does 50 finds and sends out 50 reports to each one of these guys every Monday morning and spends 4 or 5 hours doing it every Monday morning. And you may think that's a ridiculous example, but I once ran into somebody who was making a report by copying data one cell at a time from FileMaker into Excel. So I know this stuff is going on out there. All right, so you come along, you find out you're doing what every Monday morning? You're spending how much of your week on just this? And you say, we're going to script this because you're a superhero. And so we create what I call the 50 states report. I'm going to walk you through this script and then we'll show you what it looks like in action. So I've got some commenting here. Oh, you always want to put in commenting at the top of a script to talk about what it does, who built it, when it was built, because these are good things to know. And then I set the error capture on, and in this case I set user abort on because this script takes a while and you don't want to wait for the whole script. I'm going to turn it off while it's running. Then we go to the reports layout. We capture a variable, this variable, and I'm using a custom function here to get it. It's called getIndex. I looked it up online. And so what this does is it returns the index, that is to say one unique value for each of the values in the database in a given field. In this case, I'm getting all the states that are in the database and putting them in an alphabetical list. Then I set a counter to 1 because I'm going to run a script. I want to run a loop. I want to keep track of how many times I've gone through that loop. So I'm setting a counter to 1, and I'm setting another variable called trap to be the number of values in my states variable, which is how many times am I going to go through this loop. So when my counter reaches the same value as the trap, it's time to stop the loop. Because we all know, even before we started programming, that the last thing you want is to be stuck in an infinite loop. You want to have an escape from a loop. So we're going to use a loop. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create another variable called state singular that takes one of the values out of that states array, and it's the one that's the counter. So is this the first time through? Then let's get the first one. Is it the second time through? We'll get the second one. And then we'll perform a find on that basis, get all the records for that state, we'll sort them the way we need them, and then we will capture whatever we need to capture, and then we're going to set a path because we're going to put it out as a PDF, and we'll set a second path because we're going to put it out as an Excel. And then we're going to save it as a PDF, and then we're going to save it as an Excel using those different path variables. And then we're going to use a send mail step. Right now this is set to send them to my email. I'm going to change that before I upload this file. And then it will send it to the state director. And so here I'm actually using the state variable with director at to simulate different email addresses for all those bosses. And then I'm going to increment by counter by 1, so the next time we go through we'll be on the second time through. And then I'm going to test and see, is my counter equal to my trap? Is it time to get out of this script yet? If this proves true, then it will jump down to the next step after the end loop. Otherwise, from the end loop, it will go back to the loop step and go through the whole process again. Now I've also added a little bit of code right here. It's going to pause for 3 seconds every 3 states it does, and that's so I can stop the demo while I'm showing it to you because we don't want to spend that much time. Let's take a look at what that looks like when it runs. So now it's running, and now you see my states report folder has already popped up here. And in the PDF folder, I've already got Alaska. In the CSV folder, I've got both Alaska and Alabama. And we can sit here and watch these add on for as long as we feel like it. And it just adds these. And now if I pop open my email, we can see that I'm already collecting emails from myself of here's my report with two, yay, where have you been all my life? 2 attachments, all sent from FileMaker. This time I'm using the SMTP server to send these emails. So now our administrative assistant, instead of having to spend 5 hours, can just click a button and go get a cup of coffee. But we can make it better still because we can set this up to run on FileMaker's server as a scheduled script at 4 in the morning on Monday morning, and now she doesn't have to think about it at all, freeing her up to do the things that only people can do. And then she buys you a present every Christmas because you got her 5 extra hours a week to do whatever else she needs or wants to do. Does this sound like a superpower or not? Okay, so let me get back to this because it's going to pause again for me in a minute. Close that. And it's tricky sometimes to quit a script while it's running. The best way is to pop open Script Debugger and just close it. But another way is hit Command period. There we go. And I'm out of the script because I caught it while I was paused, I think. How far have I gotten with this? Yeah, plenty far. That's much quicker than we could have done this manually. There we go. We're done with that now. Great. So that was my demo file. We will, let me show you a little bit more about it for when you download it, because I do strongly encourage you to download it. All the scripts are pretty well commented in it. You can play with this. You can see things that I didn't get a chance to talk about. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. You can hook up with me on LinkedIn. I'd love that. My phone number is here, and my web page is here as well. So feel free to click on those and just come right back to me. Got a couple more things to touch base on. So you always want to be on the lookout for the opportunity to be the hero, to give that person some extra hours, extra days in their schedule over a month or a year or a week. You can never comment your scripts too much. When you come back to a script a year later, you don't want to be thinking, what was I thinking when I wrote this? Leave yourself a note, leave yourself some crumbs. And 7 years from now, when it's a different developer looking at your script, they will bless you or curse you based on how you left comments in that script. You definitely want to anticipate and trap for errors. You will be sorry. If you don't do it now, you will have to do it later. It's not optional. You will come back to it at some point and say, oh, there's a bug. All right, I should have thought of this. So you always want to think through scripts from the script operation from the user's perspective. What is that user experience going to be like? This is my first time as a speaker. I hope you've liked it. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please step up. Let's make a line at one of the microphones. Because this session is being recorded, but only what's on my mic, those mics, and the screen. So if you have a question, please don't hesitate. Step up to the microphone. How much more time do I have back there?
Quick question about the file.
Please step to the microphone. Is that hard? Okay.
I have a question about scripts. I have to encrypt all of my data before, because I use FileMaker as a runtime app. Mm-hmm. And so do you know about encrypting data inside of a script, or is that a good function? Is that where I should be doing it?
Encrypting data? That's not usually a scripting function.
I use it as a function on top of my fields inside of calcs, but to run it, I've been using Blowfish, which I've been using on FileMaker 12, but now I have to move to 17 because of the Mac OS 64-bit.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that technique.
No? Okay. All right. Thank you, though.
Wow. If anybody has questions, please step to the microphone. Hold that sign up again. Thank you. All right, cool.
My question is just simple about the files that are in the download. They're not exactly the same as the files you were going through?
That's right. There will be updates, and so I'm going to be uploading new copies of the files.
Okay.
That was completely on point. Everybody wanted to know that. Anybody else have a question? I see people moving. Okay, they're going out to lunch. All right, great. So I do have to acknowledge Steve Sikora and all my coworkers at Harmonic Software Production Studios for all their support and encouragement. This has been a great experience for me. I hope you liked it. I hope you want to have me back again. And with that thought in mind, there will be updates to the session. So do download them. Probably, I hope by the end of the day, we'll have those uploaded. Thank you so much. Remember to fill out your session evaluations. I'd love to come back, so please be kind. I hope you had a great time with this.